you've got a problem with Donald Trump. You don't know what he's going to say. His advisors don't know what he's going to say. And as a man, I wouldn't give him house room. But the truth is that he is the president of the United States, the most important nation on earth, a very important ally. And you can't lock him up in some part of Midwest America. So you have to try and have a dialogue. And the great trick in the light of the way he behaves is to try and behave in a way that you feel is commensurate with British dignity and experience. Theresa May's got a very difficult problem on her hands.
Well, I'll come back and talk to you about the special relationship. I'll come back and talk to you about the special relationship as you saw it between Ronald Reagan and Mrs. Thatcher in a moment. But first of all, Craig Oliver, you know, you've been there as head of communications at Number 10. Theresa May have been expecting some kind of strange utterance, or I don't mean strange in terms of politics, but I mean out of time, out of place, because he's been doing lots of things over the last 2 days with Angela Merkel and NATO and so forth. But sitting right next to him at dinner tonight.
Well, I think it's going to be presented as a bit of a disaster by the media, but in reality, if I were in Number 10, I would be seeing this as a bit of an opportunity. The reality is this is a brilliant scoop for The Sun tonight. It's an absolutely great, cracking story to have, but I don't think it's particularly good news for Boris Johnson, and I'm not sure it's a very good story for the hard Brexiteers. The reason for that is we saw what happened when a US president came over to Britain during the Remain campaign. I was part of the Remain campaign. We thought it was great that he was coming over and telling us you'd be at the back of the queue. It didn't work. People shrieked. They didn't like it at all. And I suspect people won't like the idea of him interfering.
They may not like it, but actually he can make it happen, can't he? Because, you know, if he is saying that if you go ahead with this, the common rule book and so forth, you're not going to get an American trade deal. It's not like someone coming and cheerleading. It's someone that can make that happen.
Well, he is technically pointing out an uncomfortable truth, which is if you actually look at the deal that Theresa May has set out, it is very hard to do a trade deal with the United States.
What do you make of it? I mean, you're a Trump cheerleader here. What do you make of it, Sarah?
I'm not, I wouldn't say cheerleader, but I am a Trump convert, I will say. And I have to say that it's true. I mean, if you're in a customs union, you're not free to be global Britain. And it's really up to the government to implement the will of the people now.
It's interesting, though, because, you know, one of his friends this morning said in the Today programme, he's not a politician, he's a businessman. And, he shoots from the lip and so forth. So to you, this kind of language is not unexpected. Was it unexpected and not unexpected in the same way that he more or less said that Angela Merkel was a captive of Russia, that NATO wasn't ponying up when it needed to pony up for defence? Are we to take him seriously is what I really mean.
I mean, you should take him seriously. He's president of the United States.
Yep.
But on the other hand, he's here to be a disruptor. He's here to say the absolute opposite of what you expect a politician to say. So, and that he wants to reevaluate all of America's relationships and trade deals to make sure that, well, is America really getting the best out of this?
It's interesting, disruptor, but I wonder, do you also think that actually quite delights in destabilising as well as disrupting?
Absolutely.
What do you make of that, Rebecca? Because here you are at the British Council trying to create relationships not only with Europe but with America. And, you heard what Michael Heseltine said there, Theresa May has got a hard road to hoe at the moment because she's trying to be this bridge.
I think from the British Council's perspective, we always have our eye on the long term, Kirsty, and I think we've really, all of us as a nation, got to look beyond this very difficult moment and start to describe to ourselves what we really value and what we care about and what we want to build on for the long-term future in the country. And you can't project externally unless you get it right inside. I mean, the real problem with the negotiation is we haven't got it settled at home, we haven't got a stable position. We need to lift people's eyes, look forward, build on assets, and then we'll be in a better position
to negotiate any trade deal. So this uncertainty is bound to create tensions with both Europe and also with the US.
It absolutely will.
Michael Heseltine, I want to talk to you as someone who saw up close and personal the relationship between Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. Presumably they weren't scared, and we know they weren't scared, to tell each other hard truths.
No, but I think you mustn't perpetuate the delusion of a special relationship. American policy is America first. It always has been and it always will be. And anyone who knows the history of Margaret's attempt to persuade President Reagan over the Falklands, or the way he deceived her over Grenada, realizes that the real difference between American policy today and then is that then it was conducted diplomatically and behind closed doors and with a civility. Now it's become a rather crude expression of one rather bullying character, rather disreputable character, who self-evidently got elected in the United States on the back of immigration, which he's already told us in his first speeches here, and on the consequences of the 2008 crash. If you want Nigel Farage writing British foreign policy, just support President Trump.
But Mike Hairston, there's another element to this tonight, because as well as doing this with his host, what he's also doing is, with a hop, skip and a jump, he's off to Helsinki. Now, we know that Theresa May has said that she hopes that he will raise the Skripal case and Salisbury, and of course the recent death. Not that the blame is being now, there's no definite association with Russia. I mean, what do you think about that? Him as a conduit to some kind of conversation with Putin?
Well, Theresa May has that nightmarish domestic issue of the poisoning on our territory with weapons devised in Russia. And she cannot do anything other than fight that battle, which did very courageously and got a lot of international support. And therefore, she's bound to ask President Trump to raise the issue with Mr. Putin. But I think that President Trump will not want to get down that road, because he is in the big headline news. He will be trying to find some way of coming away with a headline that he's broken through with Putin. And so, I mean, in many ways, it's a classic example of a special relationship not working. We've asked for something. I very much doubt if we will get it.
Is that your analysis, Craig Oliver, that actually, in the broader scheme of things, in Trump's big world, Salisbury doesn't matter?
Yeah, I think that's right, and I think he doesn't think the special relationship matters, which is why I think Theresa May needs to see all of this as an opportunity. It's a chance to be clear back to the President of the United States where she thinks he's wrong. She needs to be polite but firm, but say, I'm sorry, I think you're wrong on this, and you do need to stand up to Putin, and you do need to see that he's disrupting a Western alliance that is very valuable, and be very clear with him, and also be very clear with him on Brexit. Stand up to him, tell him why she's doing that, because she's dealing with reality, not a fantasy vision of the world.
But in a way, you know, what Putin said to Merkel over the gas and oil deal with Russia was right, you know. I mean, you know, she's absolutely in hock to Russia over gas and oil, while at the same time building stepping up to a defence budget.
This is what's difficult, isn't there? There's a grain of truth in a lot of what President Trump says. He says some things that are very difficult on international trade, on China, that kind of thing. That doesn't mean to say you shouldn't stand up to it sometimes.
Rebecca, from the point of the British Council, what is the best way for both Donald Trump and indeed Theresa May to engage with Putin at the moment?
I think you've got to look at the power of strong alliance and not always the power of the front foot disruption. You've got to look at how NATO itself operated as a soft power unit. It attracted people to it because it had this alliance building, value driven base to it. So if you're going to face up to Putin, you've got to think about your values, you've got to align around them, you've got to understand the soft power of attraction is as important as the push power.
As Sarah, you know, it was a case of when he goes to NATO, he slaps it about a bit and then he says everything will be all right, which is kind of classic behaviour. But what is the true Trump on this? Would Trump come to the aid of, say, for example, one of the Baltic countries if Putin becomes more aggressive? Do you think he would? Does he have a sense of that geopolitics?
I absolutely think he does. And he's already armed the Ukrainians, for one. He's put several sanctions on Russian companies, and he's expelled 63 Russian diplomats from the United States. So, I think he gets it very much. I mean, he's a tough guy, and he's going and facing another alpha male after he has already met with his gang of NATO allies.
Interesting. He needs an alpha male to go against. Is that right? Interesting.
Yeah, and I think he likes facing his foes. He's like, you think you're a bully? You haven't met me yet.
Well, listen, we just want to pause it there for a moment because I want to bring in John Sweeney, who's outside the US Ambassador's house for us tonight in North London. where President Trump will be staying later, and where a noisy protest had been planned for this evening to keep him awake. Before we hear from John, despite the prospects of protests the weekend, it's worth mentioning there is evidence that much of the British public actually backs the visit. YouGov polling suggests that by December 2017, the British public had cooled on the idea of a state visit, but a survey this week indicates that a plurality, 50% of Britons now think this working visit should go ahead. That's despite many people holding him in low esteem. So, John, what is exactly going on where you are? Do we hear pots, tins and kettles outside the ambassador's residence?
No, Kirsty, I'm afraid to say it's pretty quiet here. Now, everybody's expecting there's going to be a big demo tomorrow in the heart of London with maybe tens of thousands, maybe more, protesting against Donald Trump. But tonight there was talk of a big protest and lots of noise, pots and kettles. Donald Trump wouldn't sleep. He's going to sleep like a baby. There's hardly any protesters here. I met one elderly couple, and they'd brought along their grandkids' rattles, and then they left. There is literally nobody protesting at the moment. Now, one's always scared that somebody's going to go woo woo woo, but for the moment it's very quiet. So why could this be? Number one, the England game. Everybody's exhausted emotionally, spiritually after that. So there's no energy for it. Somebody's having a little go of a shout over there. That's quite exciting. But frankly, it's not very exciting. What we've got is a disconnect between what's been suggested in the papers, and perhaps the British government has overdone the anger that they thought that Trump would generate. Now, obviously, there's a ton of people on the left who have a real problem with Donald Trump. Whether that has actually moves across to the general population, I don't know.
Well,
but to be honest with you, right now here it's quiet.
Thank you very much indeed, John. Well, Craig Oliver, do you think there was a great overplaying of the kind of danger of his visit? You know, he's hermetically sealed from the public. Maybe that didn't even need to be the case.
Well, I think it's always the case that when expectations are set very high, they never really quite meet them. Although, let's see what happens with the protest tomorrow and the Trump baby.
Well, was there from the point of view that actually Donald Trump was almost, it seemed to be suggesting he was kind of bring it on when he was asked about this earlier, that actually, you know, he quite liked the idea of protest because guess what? He's the centre of attention. But he also thought that Britons liked him, and we already know from that poll that, you know, it's absolutely correct that Britain is divided over him.
Absolutely, and America's divided over him. This is nothing new to him. And in fact, I think he'd be offended if there weren't protesters, actually. But at the end of the day, what happens at this working meeting is much more important than any balloon in the air or how many tens of thousands of people come out. And quite frankly, I think the special relationship will be fine long term.
Well, the special relationship will be maybe tested at dinner tonight because presumably Theresa May knows what's in the sun now. She's also going to meet him at Chequers tomorrow, and then he is going on to tea with the Queen at Windsor. Now, in that situation with these two strong women, we talked about him with a bully, face to face, up close, what do you think the atmosphere is going to be like?
I would love to be a fly on the wall, but I think it will be. I think it'll be productive. You know, the president speaks from the hip. You'll know exactly what he thinks. I think maybe Prime Minister May have a harder time being as direct as him, but I think it'll be productive.
Finally, Lord Heseltine, if you were advising Theresa May about the way she should go about the Chequers meeting tomorrow, what would you be saying to her?
Well, I think she's got a real problem because he's only said tonight about the Chequers compromise that it's dead. Well, I was saying on your programmes 2 days ago that it's dead. So he's only latched on to the self-evident fact that there's not a majority in the House of Commons for the Chequers fudge. But all he's really highlighting is that Theresa May has now got an impossible problem. The Brexiteers want a hard Brexit. Theresa May can't get a hard Brexit through the House of Commons. And in my view, the whole problem of Brexit is now unravelling. they put the Brexiteers in charge, David Davis and Boris. 2 years later, they'd come up with no sort of deal that was possible. The deal that has been put forward will be so watered down or strengthened from the European point of view that it'll infuriate the Brexiteers in the House of Commons. And Donald Trump has merely really exposed what we all know, that Theresa May's got a near insoluble problem. Now, I hope that this will lead to the collapse of Brexit.
Well, thank you all very much indeed.